Buddha is one of the most recognized spiritual figures in all of human history. Buddhism as a tradition has spread across every continent, shaped entire civilizations, and continues to draw thousands of new practitioners every single year across dozens of different schools and lineages that each carry their own interpretation of what the Buddha actually was and what his teachings actually meant. And this is where something genuinely interesting begins. Because not all of those schools agree on a single foundational question. Who was the Buddha? And was he the only one? Some traditions hold that Siddhartha Gautama, the Indian prince who renounced his throne, sat under the Bodhi tree and attained enlightenment, was the one and only Buddha. The singular historical figure around whom the entire tradition is built. Others hold a completely different view, that Buddhahood is a state of consciousness that has been attained by many beings across vast stretches of time, that Siddhartha was simply the most recent in a long lineage of Buddhas, and that there will be more to come. Many traditions already name the next Buddha, Maitreya, the Buddha of the future, who is said to appear when the world has fallen into sufficient chaos and confusion that a new embodiment of awakened consciousness becomes necessary. If that second view is correct, and it is the view held by the majority of Buddhist schools across the world, then a question arises that nobody asks directly. Who was the first one? If Buddhahood is a state that many have attained across infinite time, who attained it first? Who were the Buddhas before Siddhartha? What connected their teachings across completely different eras and completely different cultures? And what was the common thread running through their lives and their journeys that caused the people around them to recognize them as Buddhas at all? That is exactly what this video is going to break down. Part 1. The Buddhas before Siddhartha. The Theravada Buddhist tradition, which is considered by many scholars to be the oldest surviving school of Buddhism, does not actually teach that Siddhartha Gautama was the first Buddha. It teaches that he was the most recent one in a line that stretches back through time further than ordinary historical records can follow. The Pali Canon, which is the oldest complete collection of Buddhist scriptures in existence, names 6 Buddhas who came before Siddhartha. Vipassi, Sikhi, Vesabu, Kakusanda, Konagamana, and Kassapa. Each of them is described as having attained the same state of complete awakening that Siddhartha attained. Each of them is described as having taught the same essential truth through a different vehicle appropriate to the era and the people they appeared among, and each of them is described as having eventually passed away, leaving a teaching that slowly degraded over time, until the world forgot what genuine awakening actually looked like, and a new Buddha became necessary. The Mahayana tradition, which represents the majority of Buddhist practitioners worldwide today, takes this even further. It teaches that the number of Buddhas across infinite cosmic time is literally beyond counting. That in every era, in every world system, across the infinite expanse of existence, beings have been attaining Buddhahood continuously. Siddhartha Gautama was not the beginning of this lineage. He was one expression of it that appeared in this particular world at this particular moment in history, because the conditions were right and the need was there. The Vajrayana tradition, practiced primarily in Tibet and Mongolia, goes deepest of all. It introduces the concept of the Adi Buddha, which translates as the primordial Buddha, the original Buddha, the Buddha that was never born and never attained awakening because it was never not awake. Figures like Samantabhadra and Vajradhara are understood in this tradition not as historical persons, but as the personification of the primordial awakened state itself, the consciousness that underlies all existence, and from which every subsequent Buddha drew their realization. Part 2. The thread that connected them all. If there have been many Buddhas across many different eras, teaching in many different ways to different cultures, the question that matters most is what connected them. What was the common thread running through all of them that caused the people around them to recognize them as something categorically different from an ordinary teacher or a wise person or a religious reformer? The answer is not found in their specific teachings, which varied considerably across different Buddhas and different eras. It is found in the quality of what they had become as human beings, and in the specific journey that produced that quality. Every Buddha in every tradition is described as having gone through the same essential internal process, regardless of the external circumstances of their life. A period of genuine and often extreme confrontation with the nature of suffering and impermanence. A complete dismantling of the ordinary ego structures that most human beings use to navigate reality. A direct and unmediated encounter with the nature of consciousness itself that produced a permanent shift in how reality was perceived in them. And finally, an emergence from that process with a quality of presence, clarity, and compassion that was immediately recognizable to the people around them as something that went beyond ordinary human development. The specific path each Buddha walked to arrive at that state was different. The specific teachings each Buddha used to point others toward that state were different. But the destination was identical, and the quality of being that characterized someone who had arrived there was identical across every tradition and every era. This is what the people around each Buddha were actually recognizing. Not a particular set of beliefs, or a particular set of teachings, or a religious identity, but a quality of human presence that demonstrated in every interaction, in every word, in every moment of contact, that this person was operating from a completely different relationship with reality than anyone they had ever encountered. A person in whom the ego's management of experience had genuinely fallen away. A person who was fully present with whatever was in front of them without the distortion of personal agenda, personal fear, or personal need. A person who could look directly at suffering, including their own, without flinching and without being consumed by it. A person whose compassion for other human beings was not a position they had adopted or a virtue they were practicing, but the natural expression of a consciousness that had recognized itself in every living being it encountered. That quality has no cultural boundary. It has no historical limitation. It appears wherever and whenever a human being completes the process of genuine awakening fully enough that what remains is no longer primarily a person with a history and an agenda, but an expression of the awareness that was always already there underneath the person. This is what every Buddha across every tradition shared. This is the common thread that connected the Pasi to Kassapa, to Siddhartha, to every awakened being that came before and after all of them. And this is what the concept of the original Buddha is ultimately pointing at. The recognition that what produces a Buddha is not a unique historical accident, but a permanent possibility built into the structure of human consciousness itself, waiting in every human being for the conditions and the genuine willingness to finally emerge. Closing. The question of who was the first Buddha ultimately dissolves into something more interesting than a historical answer. If Buddhahood is a state of consciousness rather than a person, if it has been attained across infinite time by beings who walked completely different paths through completely different worlds, then the question of who was first becomes less important than the question of what it actually is, and whether it is genuinely available to every human being alive right now becomes the main question. Everyone that is seriously engaged with this question has arrived at the same answer. The awakened state that every Buddha throughout history has embodied is not a foreign achievement that belongs to a special category of being that ordinary humans cannot access. It is the deepest nature of every human mind, present right now underneath every layer of conditioning, reactivity, and ego construction, waiting to be uncovered. The original Buddha was not a person who lived at a particular moment in history. The original Buddha is the awareness that has always been awake at the ground of every mind that has ever existed. And every human being who has ever genuinely pursued that discovery has been walking toward the same place that every Buddha throughout infinite time walked toward before them.